Vraiment de la bonne musique cet après-midi, on adore! Bonjour tout le monde, bienvenue à la science d'accepter l'ambiguïté. Welcome to today's segment on embracing ambiguity. My name is Audriane. I am an HR advisor at Employment and Social Development Canada. I'm also the lead ambassador for my department. Donc, je m'appelle Audriane Racine, je suis conseillère en ressources humaines à Emploi et Développement social Canada. Je suis aussi l'ambassadrice nationale des étudiants de mon ministère. Donc, avant de commencer, I would like to begin by the acknowledgement that I'm on the land from the unceded territory of the Algonquian Anishinaabe people. The Algonquian peoples have lived on this land since time immemorial. We are grateful to have the opportunity to represent on this territory. Donc, je vous joins aujourd'hui de la région de la capitale nationale, donc sur le territoire des peuples algonquiens Anishinaabe. Je suis très, très reconnaissante d'être ici aujourd'hui. So as we move through today's session, please share your comments in the chat space and question by using the Q&A in the language of your choice. You can vote for the question you like by clicking on the thumbs up. Donc, au fur et à mesure qu'on va progresser dans la session d'aujourd'hui, veuillez partager vos questions en utilisant le bouton de questions et réponses, le Q&A, dans la langue de votre choix. Vous pouvez voter pour les questions que vous voulez poser en cliquant sur le bouton du petit pouce levé. So today we have 3 panelists joining us. They will share their expertise and thoughts around today's topics. Aujourd'hui, on accueille 3 panélistes qui partageront leur expérience et leurs expertises alentour du sujet d'aujourd'hui. Donc, allons les rencontrer. We will start with Gina. Bonjour Gina, comment ça va aujourd'hui?
Bonjour, I am well. So my name is Gina Scaramuzzi. I'm born and raised in Winnipeg. I see we do have some participants, so hello neighbor. I am currently working for the Canadian Grain Commission, which is one of the few departments that is headquartered outside of the National Capital Region. And I am the acting manager of ICMS, Values and Ethics and Organizational Development. I have over 15 years in the public service, a few with Health Canada and Public Health Agency, and over 11 years with the Canada School of Public Service. Before joining the federal family, I worked at the University of Manitoba and the Manitoba Liquor Commission and had a bunch of different roles, from laboratory demonstrator for biology and chemistry to a wine consultant. So done lots of different kind of jobs in my career, but have really found I'm currently loving the work probably now more than ever. And I started at the Canadian Grain Commission 2 weeks before the pandemic hit. And I've spent most of my time working on COVID-19, business recovery, reintegration, future of work, change management. And so I've been embracing ambiguity these past 18 months like never before, and super excited for this session. Thank you.
J'ai vraiment hâte de t'entendre jaser au courant de la session. Merci beaucoup, Gina. Megan, bonjour Megan.
Hi, my name is Megan Young. So I, unlike Gina, I've lived all over the place. I wish I could say I was born and raised somewhere, but I was born in Summerside, PEI, so I'm a maritimer. And then my dad was in the military. So I've lived at this point in 6 provinces, about a dozen cities. I've been all over Canada. So I've been to every province and only 1 territory. So I'm missing both Nunavut and the Yukon, but I'm hoping that'll change. I'm a member of the Halibut First Nation, which is from the west coast of Newfoundland. And then when I look at my career, I think you can probably tell I'm a little bit restless. So after I finished my undergraduate degree, I lived in Calgary and I worked at Deloitte in accounting. I got bored. I moved to Ottawa. I worked for Export Development Canada during the automotive crisis, the 2008 financial crisis. I got bored, decided I wanted to join the Navy. Did that for a couple of years, had a medical release, which was an interesting experience when we start talking about failure and failure that is out of your hands, but not necessarily your head. I was retired for a year. So I moved back in with my parents and decided to engage in competitive crochet. Went backpacking around Europe for 3 months, did went scuba diving for a few weeks, moved to Toronto, did my MBA at Ryerson University. Tried to rejoin the public service. They wouldn't take me. I went and became a management consultant at Gartner. and then in some crazy sleep-deprived haze at Disney World, decided I should join the public sector and ended up working at Shared Services for a year. Got my place a week before the pandemic, so I spent about 6 weeks actually working with people in Ottawa, and then joined CBSA 6 months ago, roughly, as the Director of Automation, Integration, and Emerging Technologies in the Border Technology Innovation Directorate. So that's me in a nutshell.
Thank you very much, Megan. The last but not least, Yumi.
Yeah, hello. So I'm Yumi, and I'm originally from Japan, but from a mixed heritage family. So my mom's side is indigenous, my dad's side is like ethnically Japanese. So it's like colonial history, both sides of colonial history mixed into like one family. So that's where I come from. But I'm an immigrant and settler here, and yeah, I originally came for university. So I came as an international student, and I'll talk a little bit about it later. But didn't know the language, didn't know the culture, didn't know anybody, and I worked a lot after school. I worked a lot in the not-for-profit sector, doing a lot of like equity and inclusion, like institutional change, organizational capacity building, that type of work. And also working with immigrants, newcomers, refugees, helping them start a new life in Canada. And I joined the government about 5 years ago. So I've been with the immigration department for the last 5 years. And at first I started out in social policy. So social policy to help newcomers find a new footing in Canada, and including social innovation policy, like how do we set up the nonprofit sector for better innovation capacity, and so that we can lift many boats together and not just one agency here and there. And since then I've moved around a bit, and I've done some time in the operations side of the same social program, just to understand the policy ops continuum, NHQ regions dynamics, or the fundee dynamics better. And I also did a little bit on economic and humanitarian policy for skilled refugees. But last year, with the public response on anti-racism, I actually decided to help out on my department's new anti-racism task force. So that's where I'm with right now. So trying to combine all my past experience and learning from the past experience, and trying to set up my department, have a good foundation for the change for the future. And also in my private life, I volunteer at the Ottawa Community Foundation. So I'm the youngest director of the board there, and trying to open doors for people who come after me too. And so lots of different things, but I'm really looking forward to the conversation today.
Merci beaucoup, Yumi. Thank you for joining us today. Merci beaucoup d'être avec nous aujourd'hui. We know that experimentation and taking risks are necessary components for our work, yet we have to manage risk in a way that is tolerable for our department and the public. Donc, on sait là, que faire des expérimentations, de prendre des risques, ça fait partie de notre travail, mais on doit s'assurer que c'est fait de manière tolérable pour nos ministères et le public. Donc, today we are going to talk about the ambiguity on how our three guests have failed at times, but learn from these failures to innovate better. Donc aujourd'hui, on va vraiment parler de cette ambiguïté qu'on passait à travers nos trois panélistes d'aujourd'hui et comment ils ont réussi à passer à travers ces échecs-là et à innover de manière exponentielle, si on veut. Donc, the first question I would like to hear from the three of us, the three of you. Oh, my English is still in the weekend. Sorry about that. So, my question, let's talk about a time where you failed at something important to you. How did you know you failed, and what did you learn from the experience? Donc, en français, parlez-nous un peu d'un moment où vous avez échoué dans quelque chose d'important pour vous. Comment savez-vous que vous avez échoué et qu'est-ce que vous avez appris de cette expérience? Yumi, do you want to start?
Sure. And actually, speaking of language, I'll talk about language. So when I first came to Canada, my English was not good. It was not good. I got into the university, UBC, but it wasn't good enough to actually take the university level English literature class, which was required for my degree. So so how do I know I failed? I literally kept failing the English as second language test that I needed in order to actually take university classes. And it actually came as a surprise because I got into the university. So I thought the university thought my English was good enough, but no, it was like a big hit to my ego. And it was really disheartening and scary. And I was so stressed out. I was convinced that I was going to flunk out of university. Like I almost panicked. And, but at the same time, I just had to adjust my sort of mentality really quick. So instead of viewing myself as a student who was really strong at Japanese writing, forget all of that, forget all of the test scores that I had in the past, and I just had to just work really, really hard, and not just working hard, but getting over my pride or ego or like self-identity about someone who was good at taking tests, but just put myself out there, knowing that I'm not good at it yet, knowing that I am 100% sure I'm going to embarrass myself in front of other people. I have to do it. Like the only way out is through it, type of mentality. So I studied a lot. I took the, ESL class. I, asked questions of the professor so many times. I did all the exercises, but also, made a point to go up and talk to people in English, even though I didn't understand what they're saying. I would still go and talk to them anyway. Ask them, what does that word mean? I don't understand. And in class too, I didn't understand anything I was reading, but, record the lecture, take notes, go back to my room, listen to it, rewind 3-4 times to make sure I understand, go ask the prof. And in class, again, I could have just stayed quiet in class, but made a point to say something, again, knowing that probably what I'm saying is not as good as other students because I didn't understand the material, but just accepting that that's the only way that I can improve. So just do it anyway.
C'est si bon ce que tu viens de dire. Moi aussi, Yumi, je me sens dans cet état-là en ce moment avec la langue seconde. C'est pas facile d'apprendre une langue seconde puis de vivre certains échecs, mais en même temps, ça fait partie de l'apprentissage. Ça fait partie, c'est une étape qu'on doit franchir, se pratiquer, puis c'est pas un échec, ça fait partie de l'apprentissage. Merci beaucoup. Megan?
It's interesting for me, failing at something important. And one of the biggest things I've learned is how to quit, because that was something I was always really bad at. And so when I realized accounting wasn't for me, I didn't necessarily fail at it. It wasn't going well, that's for sure. But I wasn't happy. And I couldn't quit. I kept sticking it out. And it was a really miserable experience, to be completely honest. And I felt like everything was falling apart. With the military, I got sick, and I had taken a big risk to join, and I was fit. I was sure I was ready to go. And I came down with something that was almost like a precursor to COVID. It was that same type of respiratory disease with those long COVID symptoms we hear about where people have trouble walking and being able to breathe. So I went from being able to run 10, 12K to not being able to walk 60 feet outside without having to stop, catch my breath, and wheeze. And I remember it was the first time I'd ever really had my heart set on something and not been able to achieve it. With accounting, I was miserable. So when I quit, it wasn't a big deal. But for this, I was confident, I could do this. There was nothing stopping me. So I felt like I had failed. And as part of the release proceedings, it's a very challenging, almost dehumanizing experience to go through all the paperwork and the meetings and everything like that. and I'm feeling like I failed. And I met with a therapist, a social worker here in Ottawa, who actually helped me. And she's like, it's not a failure. She's like, you're viewing it as a failure. And she said, you know, it wasn't your fault. And she's like, but if it's easier for you to think of it as a failure, maybe this is a lesson for you to start thinking about failure productively. And being able to say, like, okay, I went through this experience. It didn't work out for me, but what can I do with this? And what kind of person will it make me for when I come out? So she told me, Megan, you didn't fail, but at the same time, maybe this is a learning opportunity for you. And that's sort of how I started to view it, so that I could start moving forward and figuring what my next steps look like.
Megan est en train de partager qu'elle, c'est le fait de quitter ses emplois qui ont été difficiles pour elle. Elle savait que la comptabilité, c'était pas quelque chose qui l'intéressait, mais c'était difficile pour elle de quitter, puis elle voyait ça comme un échec. Puis ensuite, elle a été militaire, puis aussi, elle était rendue qu'elle avait des problèmes de souffle, là, ça marchait pas du tout. Puis elle est allée le consulter, puis ils ont dit non, faut pas voir ça comme un échec, il faut être capable de changer son point de vue pour voir ça comme un échec productif et non un échec personnel. Merci beaucoup, Megan, c'est un bon point. We need to think positive. It's a positive, it's a positive thing that it comes in our life, and we need to be better by this experience. Merci, Megan. Gina?
For sure. So my, kind of experience was a little bit different in that I was given this amazing opportunity. So I was at the Canada School of Public Service at the time, and I was given this opportunity to lead a new business line for events. They were like shorter learning interventions for public servants with a focus on networking. So public servants had that opportunity to learn from each other. And so, off to the races I went, and tried to put together these events and have topics that were of interest to public servants and in line with government priorities. And, everything was great until complaints started coming in. And it was complaints from clients. And it wasn't about the content, it was really about the access. And so, public servants in Victoria, BC would see an event happening in Regina, Saskatchewan, and would say, well, we want to attend this. And at the time, they were all in person. And so, well, why don't we have access to this? And we're missing out on that learning opportunity. And so that's when I kind of realized, okay, as much success as we were having with the individual events that, people in that city were able to participate in, at a kind of larger scale, we were failing public servants, especially because, this Canada School of Public Service is a central agency. And so it was hard to really hear that failure and really acknowledge that, especially in the midst of all this positive buzz and all these accolades and, even some awards of great things. And so, I needed to take a step back and really reach out and realize that it's not one individual that is responsible for success or failure. And how can you leverage your network, your colleagues, to help you with new initiatives, right? And so, it was starting to form those relationships with my colleagues from coast to coast to see if they were getting the same complaints in their regions, how we could work together to really leverage each other's talents and knowledge, and really come up with a schedule of offerings that were available to every public servant, no matter where they lived, and were relevant and sort of equitable. And so this was, 7 years ago. We weren't doing events such as this one online. And we really needed to kind of rethink of our approach. And so a lot of work and time and effort that had gone in to creating these kind of plans were tossed out the window. And sometimes that's hard to accept, that you need to scrap and kind of start over and really open your mind up to other people's ideas and approaches that have worked. So yeah, that's my story there.
Merci beaucoup, Gina. Gina est en train de dire qu'elle a déjà eu la chance de leader, si on veut, une opportunité de faire des activités. Les activités étaient bâties en fonction de priorités gouvernementales. Tout allait bien, sur tous les aspects, le contenu, il n'y a personne qui chialait, mais il y a eu des petits problèmes au niveau de l'accessibilité parce que c'était dans plusieurs régions, puis c'était ouvert au Canada. Les activités en présentiel marchaient seulement pour les gens qui étaient dans la région. Donc, il y a eu des plaintes à ce niveau-là, puis il n'y avait pas encore la possibilité de faire des événements virtuels. Donc, d'aller chercher des ressources ailleurs pour voir comment on pouvait collaborer avec des gens dans les autres régions. Mais tout allait bien, puis c'est juste une petite chose plus négative, mais ça leur a permis d'aller voir comment ils pouvaient améliorer la situation pour ouvrir ces activités-là au plus de gens possible. Merci beaucoup, Gina. Je viens de voir aussi dans les commentaires, quelqu'un a dit que chaque expérience nous apprend quelque chose, puis je pense que c'est vraiment vrai, puis ça complète aussi bien ce que tu viens de nous dire. Gina, j'ai une autre petite question pour toi. I would like to know what are the benefits of failing? Quels sont les avantages de l'échec?
Mm-hmm. Well, really, all growth comes through failure, right? And that's what we said. Every experience teaches us something, right? Chaque expérience nous apprend quelque chose. And so it's really this idea of growth mindset. And so, if we adopt a growth mindset, we believe that we can keep learning and we can become better with hard work, with practice, that we can improve our abilities. And so we then tend to embrace those challenges, and we're open to the feedback. We're open to hearing how it's maybe not working, ideas on how to improve what we're doing. And we generally are going into those projects or situations with a curiosity and a desire to learn. If we adopt a fixed mindset, right, that is where we don't want to try anything that we're not good at, and it's almost that fear that makes us stuck in that routine and that habit. And so in that fixed mindset, people don't like doing things that they don't know. So when we talk about ambiguity, right, they may kind of steer away from that. Whereas a growth mindset is like that curiosity. Oh, I don't know. I have no idea, but I'm open to learning, to talking about it, and to kind of growing. And so, it's really important for us to embrace that concept. And I mean, COVID what a lesson that has given us all, right? I mean, there has been so much uncertainty and so much information that has changed throughout the pandemic. Really being okay with the ambiguity, with the fact that none of us have experienced this before. This is all new, and figuring it out as we go has really allowed those with a growth mindset to not only survive the pandemic, but in some areas thrive. And I always think about it as like the best athletes, they fail and they fall more than the rest of us because they keep trying things that have never been done before, and they're always trying to master what may be the impossible, and try new tricks, right? And that's kind of the idea here, is that you are going to fail maybe over and over and over again, but you will learn every single time, and that will help with your success.
Je suis tellement d'accord. J'ai bien aimé là, quand tu parles des athlètes. C'est vrai que les athlètes, eux, sont habitués à essayer des choses impossibles. Ils vont tomber, ils vont se relever, mais ça fait partie de l'apprentissage. Puis le fait d'accepter cet échec-là, ça nous permet aussi d'avoir une ouverture d'esprit, d'accepter les commentaires, d'accepter les feedbacks qu'on reçoit, les rétroactions. Ça nous permet d'avancer. Je suis bien d'accord avec ce que tu viens de dire là. Merci beaucoup. Megan, j'ai une question pour toi. Je vais la poser en français, puis ensuite, je vais te la poser en anglais. Comment pouvons-nous bâtir une culture de l'échec tout en avançant? Quelles qualités devons-nous développer en nous-mêmes et dans notre équipe? So, how we can build a culture of failing forward? What qualities do we need to foster in ourselves and in our team?
This is an interesting question for me, because I find culture, there's those cheesy quotes like culture eats strategy for breakfast and things like that are really interesting, because the public service is a very risk-averse culture. We're scared of our shadows, and people always bring up things like Phoenix as an example of a large public failure. And there's some really great Auditor General reports on Phoenix and how it is it didn't fail because of the technology. It failed because of the culture of the public service, including the fact that people are compensated for delivering things on time. So it's, here the train works, but the tracks aren't built properly, so it can't go anywhere, but it works. So we've technically delivered the train on time. That's a culture where people don't care about the actual outcomes. They care about meeting, the check boxes. It's something I've seen a lot in the public service already, where people talk about managing to red, green, yellow. Oh, this is green. Why is it green? Well, because it has to be green. Oh, okay. It's an understanding of risk of things like that. And then we also have a tendency I've found to do like these massive projects. So what I've been doing with my team is I want them to fail, and I want them to feel like they can experiment and try stuff. And so I have literally told them, I bought these HoloLenses. They're augmented reality headsets. So you put them on and you can have someone sitting anywhere who can see what you're seeing, or you can interact with each other on them and things like that. So I gave them to my junior new employees. I went and dropped them off at their house. They get their director drive to their house, dropping off these $6,000 toys. And I said, play with them. I said, set them up on your home computer. Let's play with them. Let's see what we can do. I want you to get comfortable with it. Just, I told them to F around with them. I'd use the F-bomb. See what you can do. And so that's what they did. And my plan is, and what we're going to do is we're going to set up a pilot, a very, very small pilot. And at CBSA, a pilot is something that you use live, and a proof of concept is something that's just, you make up fake data and play with it there and fake scenarios. But I reached out to the prairies, because whenever I talk about these things, I say, oh, well, if you're in the middle of nowhere in Saskatchewan, because I love saying Saskatchewan, it's sort of the perfect place to talk about. And we're going to ship out some of these devices, and we're going to work with them in a small, contained experiment to see if it's going to work or not. And that's what the plan is. So I've given my team, the capacity, and I asked them for updates, like, how's it going? So we had a meeting, and they said, yeah, Megan, it's going well, but we're sort of getting to the point now where we're running out of it. We have a good understanding of the tech. It's like, okay, now we're going to start talking to more people, and we're going to start bringing other people into the fold because we feel confident with it. So let's bring a few other people, and we'll have some conversations. So we've set really, really, like, they're small goals, but it's stuff that can have a lot of impact. We just need to make sure that we're going. And frankly, if it fails, I'm willing to take it. Right? My job, and the job of anyone who's senior to you, should really to be your poop umbrella. So if they take a risk, they need to take that ownership. And that's something that I've always said, like, you need someone to pin this on, pin it on me. Like, let's be honest, I'm a public servant. You're not going to, the chances of me getting fired are slim to none. And I've asked about this because it took a while for people to warm up to me when I joined SSC. I was coming from the private sector. I came from Gartner. People hate consultants. They hate management consultants, especially. And finally, there was one person, it took him a while, and then he was really good for telling me the truth. And I said, why are people scared of failure in the public service? Like, I don't get it. You can't get fired. Like, it is almost impossible to get fired. We all know this, right? Like, let's be honest. We know this. Why are you scared? Like, why are people scared? And he said, Megan, he's like, the thing is, if you do really well and you stick your neck out and you take a big risk and the project succeeds, you might get an award, a pat on the back, a lunch. It's like, if you stick your neck out and you fail, you're going to get put in a corner doing data entry in some mainframe database until you die or retire. And I was like, the public service is big. There's like, 250,000 people who work here. There's tons of departments. There's all sorts of options. Why don't you just go work for the Canadian Grain Commission, right? Or go work, like, you're doing great work. Like, why don't you just go somewhere that isn't necessarily on your radar? And he just said, we don't think that. We don't think like that. It's like, it's just, we get so caught into the machine, we're scared of moving. So.
Merci, Megan. Megan est en train de dire que c'est beaucoup aussi la culture là, qui a vraiment un impact sur le fait d'accepter cet échec-là. Elle a parlé aussi de Phoenix, c'est un petit incontournable. Les rails étaient défectueuses, mais le train avançait bien. J'ai bien aimé sa métaphore par rapport à ça. Puis elle, dans son équipe, elle veut que ses employés passent par ces échecs-là. Ça fait partie de l'apprentissage, en fait. Merci beaucoup, Megan. Yumi, Following up on that, what do we gain from making such a cultural shift? Dans le même ordre d'idée, que gagnons-nous à effectuer un tel changement de culture?
Yeah, so I mean, at the project level or deliverable level, almost always you end up with something of better quality that actually that's closer to actually solving the problem that you identified or meeting the needs of the people that you identified, because you took the time to think, through different angles and try things and see what doesn't work before you actually release it to the public. But at the team, like culture level, or even like individual worker level, what I experienced is that there's a culture of humility where you can be a little bit more authentic. Like, it's okay. You don't have to pretend to know everything. You don't have to pretend to have solved everything. You can actually talk to your team when you're stuck or when you're afraid of missing something. Like, you can actually deliberate with the team way before you have to go to the public. So it's actually a lot safer. It feels a lot safer to come to work and actually speaks truth to power, even in like a day-to-day team meeting discussions, or even talk to your manager or talking to your director, talking to your DG. It's a lot safer to actually name the problems that you're seeing or the red flags that you're seeing, and you can do something about it. And you get to try different solutions and see which ones work the best. It's not necessarily the perfect solution, but you get the time to test out which one might address your risks better. And in terms of like team culture, it's a lot more fun. It's when you have that psychological safety, you trust the people that you work with. You trust that they're not going to just put you down or like label you as an incompetent person forever. And then you also trust that they are always doing their best and they respect you enough to open up and share the earlier thinking or so that we can collectively improve something, and also less of the ego or turfiness too. So you get to have a team culture where you don't get attached to a particular solution. Like, you don't personalize the solution, you kind of depersonalize, you actually become a little bit more objective in a way, because everyone's now focused on solving that problem ultimately, and then everyone understands that it's going to take many iterations, and no one is personally attached to this version of the solution or this version, and no one's blaming, okay, because you came up with that one that failed, you're the bad worker. You don't have that kind of office politics. So it's actually quite nice when it gels. And the team also feels more dynamic because you don't get stuck in like analysis paralysis. You actually, even though you haven't figured it out, you get to start acting. And sometimes by acting, you start to find the momentum and you start to garner support from other people. And then you start to see more clarity out of that complete ambiguity. And so it's a process. It's still not clear when you start it out, but over time, things get a little bit more clear. You get a little bit more comfortable. You build the relationships, you build the trust, so that you actually feel like you're building something together for the benefit of the public.
Ah, c'est tellement vrai, je suis vraiment d'accord sur ce que tu viens d'apporter, là. Le fait d'accepter là, de faire ce changement-là de culture aussi, ça permet aussi en tant que personne d'être plus authentique, de ne pas avoir peur de dire qu'on a de la difficulté avec quelque chose, d'aller chercher des réponses, de parler avec ses collègues pour justement faire du brainstorming, si on veut, du remue-ménage avant de trouver des solutions avant d'aller porter le résultat au public. C'est important aussi de savoir qu'on ne sait pas tout, on n'a pas toujours les réponses, puis on a une équipe avec qui on peut travailler et voir les différentes solutions. L'autre chose aussi que Yumi partageait, c'est de ne pas s'approprier des solutions, s'approprier des idées, parce qu'après ça, on se sent mal si notre idée n'est pas choisie. Donc, de rester un peu plus objectif, comme ça fait moins mal aussi à son ego. Puis l'équipe, c'est super important d'avoir une mentalité ou une culture dans l'équipe d'accepter cet échec-là, puis d'avoir confiance au processus, de faire confiance en ses collègues, puis de partager avec ses collègues. Merci beaucoup, Yumi. J'ai une dernière question pour Gina avant qu'on saute dans les questions qui ont été posées dans le chat. Donc, failure and fault are two different things, yet I was practicing this word before the event. Interwoven, when failing, how have you avoid that later? L'échec et la faute sont deux choses différentes, mais qui sont pourtant liées, lesquelles, lorsque vous échouez, comment avez-vous évité cette dernière?
Well, and this is really building off of what Yumi said, right, about having the team and kind of working with others. Personally, when I approach projects, c'est toujours avec transparence, l'agilité, souplesse et avec une approche axée sur la clientèle. Alors, il ne s'agit pas de ma préférence ou de ma façon à travailler. Il s'agit du projet et d'informations disponibles à l'époque. Et prenez par exemple COVID. L'information a changé rapidement, donc beaucoup de décisions ont peut-être échoué, mais ce n'était pas la faute de personne. So think about it as how you are approaching these projects. You're approaching them with that idea of transparency. Like, how are you consulting your clients? How are you consulting other that you work with? And then really kind of sharing all of that information and making the decisions based on the information in that moment. And I think if you're just really open to collaboration and consultation, and it's not my way, my kind of, you take ownership, but with the fact that I am just sort of conducting this, right? I'm not the only person who's going to do it the way I personally think it should be done. I think then you can make that separation. Et bien sûr, je voudrais également dire, c'est l'agir d'avoir l'état d'esprit de confiance. So it is that growth mindset as well. It's like accepting, that things don't work out. It's just a learning opportunity, right? And so we come full circle to kind of where we started our conversations about that, and really not looking at it as a personal failure.
Merci beaucoup, Gina. J'aurais une question de fin pour vous trois, so I will have a closing question for you. Have you shared your failures aside from today? What was the result of that sharing? Donc, avez-vous partagé vos échecs à part aujourd'hui? Quels ont été le résultat de ce partage? Est-ce que quelqu'un... Oui, Yumi.
Yeah, I'll go. It's kind of building on what Gina was saying earlier, but by me sharing the parts that, that didn't quite go well, by me starting with owning that part, that kind of vulnerability, that opens up the productive, blameless retroaction sort of conversation with other people. If I go in and start with naming what I think other people did wrong, they're going to get defensive right off the bat. They don't want to share anything, and we can't really have a productive conversation. So, often I use that by just using myself as an example to set the tone and then I'm not really going there to really beat myself up either. So I kind of modeled that behavior and then set the tone, and, almost like approaching with open palms, non-threatening. And that seems to start that conversation. And I also make a point of documenting these things too. And I always frame it for the sake of doing it better next time. And I also, in my work, there is also the balance between, okay, there is a certain amount of failing that happened in this particular iteration, but it's still good. We actually learned good enough things, so that wasn't a total waste. So how can we build forward? And then there's also the time that Megan was talking about earlier on. There's a point when you have to say, you know what, this is too much failing, and it's actually not worth continuing on this path. So let's pivot, and then that's still learning of another kind. And but even having that deliberation, how do we decide at which point do we shift? It's often not. It's not always like super clear. So you still need multiple people looking at it from multiple perspectives, and you still need that open, transparent, trust-based defense, non-defensive space to be able to have that like honest discussion, which is, it doesn't always happen, but when it happens, the solid work can come out.
Thank you, Yumi. Oh, vas-y, je te laisse, Gina.
No, and just to build on that. So I always ask what worked well, what was tricky, and what would you do differently next time? Because there is no judgment there. It's sort of accepting that there are going to be things that maybe didn't work the way you wanted and could be considered a failure, quote unquote. And really just always being open to that continuous improvement and striving for progress, right? Not perfection. That's the definition of excellence. It's that you're moving forward. So kind of throwing that idea of perfection out the window and really just always making it part of the everyday conversation at work. What was great? What was tricky, and what would you do differently, and continually sharing that. And when you share that with others, and you share what was tricky for you, they'll do the same, and that's how you learn what to do better next time.
J'adore. On veut s'améliorer et non nécessairement être parfait. Puis c'est vrai, il faut accepter ça puis être ouvert aux commentaires des autres. Megan, do you have anything else to add?
No, I think it's been covered off pretty clear, right? I've become very much more open than I have been in the past. I think it's just part of it's getting older, working in different places, getting more confidence, and just also understanding that I come from a place where I have a bit more privilege and I'm willing to take that risk. I mean, like I said, what are you gonna do? You're gonna fire me? I doubt it. So I'm willing to go and stick my neck out in a way because I don't have that same sort of sense of self-preservation that some others may.
And so I want to share another thing. So in my current work, I work at the Anti-Racism Task Force, which was created last summer, really in response to the murder of George Floyd. So a lot of public attention, a lot of public expectations, a lot of hurt and anger from people who have been hurt by systemic racism and who've had enough, and also pressure from the top too within the institution, because we are expected to show results like really, really quickly. And that kind of pressure cooker environment can result in paralysis because you're too afraid of doing the wrong thing, or the stakes feels too high to get it just right. But we have two deputies, and our deputies always tell us, like, we're not looking for perfection. Just if we wait until we're perfect, we will never get it done. We will never take that first step. So they've given us the express permission to just fail forward. They said, just do it. And we know you won't get it perfect the first time, or second time, third time, fourth time, we know, but we need you to move because the public needs to see that we're serious and we're not stuck in our ego. So knowing that we're going to fail, we're going to do it anyway. And we will do it with the utmost respect and responsibility that we can muster up, right? So that it's not like we're going to be careless and it's like, we're going to fail, it's okay. No, it doesn't matter. Like, no, we're serious. But we're still going to take that courage, knowing that we will be criticized no matter what. But we're just committed to every time we take an action, we will listen from different people, communities, and they will tell us where we failed. We'll listen, we'll take that to heart, and then try something, a little bit better next time and next time and next time. And that's how we're conducting that work. And to be honest, it was really scary at first because I care so much about racism, anti-racism. So I didn't want to set things up the wrong way. And I felt like I only have one opportunity, once in a lifetime opportunity to make an impact. So I kind of stressed myself out. But, and this is all happening in the context of the pandemic, and it's all virtual team. We were created after the pandemic, so we've never met each other in person. And an organization too, it's a new topic. So everyone has a different idea of what the task force is going to accomplish or how we're going to do it. So it created a lot of emotional tension with the stakeholders, but also inside the team. But you don't have a choice but to just trust the process and just try your best in that moment, and then keep talking it out. Don't keep it quiet, keep talking it out, and you will eventually find your groove. And I feel like our team has sort of found our groove a little bit and found the forward momentum, but it's been extremely humbling.
Merci beaucoup pour vos partages. J'ai tellement appris, je me sens, on dirait que je vais grandir là, aujourd'hui là, dans ma tête. Là. Merci beaucoup. Il nous reste à peu près une dizaine de minutes. We will move on to the questions from the audience, of which you may use the Q&A function. Please remember that you can vote for the question you like by using the thumbs up. Donc, on va passer aux questions qui ont été posées dans la fonction de questions et réponses, Q&A. N'oubliez pas que vous pouvez toujours voter pour les questions que vous aimez en utilisant le petit pouce en l'air. So, the first question that I have for you, so I'm in the Q&A section. The question is, what tip do you give us to achieve our goals in our career? Est-ce qu'il y a quelqu'un qui veut se lancer?
I'm happy to start. So when I was at the University of Manitoba, I actually worked as a career and employment advisor for university students. And my first job in the public service back in the 90s was for the higher student program. So it was really about helping students launch their careers. And I would say, make sure that you are flexible in your path, your career path. So, a lot of us think it's a ladder and you're going to go for the next group and level or the next promotion, and you're always going to be working upwards until you achieve your goal. And in the public service, there's a lot of experiences that you can have in many different departments in many different parts of the country. And I would say that taking some of those lateral opportunities will serve you well. You'll grow your network and you'll grow really your experience base. And then I would say the third thing or the final thing is get involved. So, being a part of this federal youth network, taking the time to participate in these kind of events, you can connect with all of us through social media. This will also propel you kind of forward in achieving your goal, and really allow you to learn from each other. And, when you're in a department, don't kid yourself. I mean, I may call Megan at some point and be like, hey, I need something. Do you know anyone in the prairies who can come and speak about, client service with aggressive clients, right? Or I may call Yumi and say, hey, can you come speak to our senior management team? We're trying to build our kind of departmental kind of plan on anti-racism. So networks are hugely important. Move laterally. It's not always moving upward, right? And then I would say find work that you're passionate about. My undergraduate degree is a Bachelor of Science, right? I thought I was gonna, go a different path, and I just followed kind of jobs where I was able to do things that I really enjoyed, and success followed, right? So, don't worry so much about the group and level. Find the right work, find the right teams, and you'll have a great career.
C'est si bien dit. Restez flexible, si je peux traduire ce que Gina a dit, restez flexible dans votre cheminement de carrière. On pense souvent on monte d'échelons et de classe, mais soyez aussi ouverts à aller chercher de l'expérience ailleurs dans le même niveau, donc de penser aussi horizontalement plutôt que verticalement. Ça vous permet d'aller chercher d'autres expériences, de faire des connexions. Le réseautage aussi, c'est super important. N'ayez pas peur d'aller chercher des liens ailleurs. C'est super important pour sa carrière. Puis impliquez-vous. Ça vous permet aussi d'atteindre ces objectifs-là de carrière. I will go to the next question. Can you share any ideas about Rue? My question is no longer here. Okay. Can you share any ideas about relationship failures? How did you rebuild trust to be able to move forward with a colleague or a stakeholder? Donc, est-ce que vous pouvez nous donner des exemples de relations qui ont échoué? Comment vous avez été capable de reconstruire cette confiance-là avec un collègue dans votre carrière, en fait. Megan, I saw your in.
We have this going on right now. So when I came into this team, CBSA had done a big reorg, and there were certain things that had followed people, as opposed to it making sense for that function to be within my team. So one of these items involved just automating some processes, but we were using data and accessing another department system. And this had been something where they were trying to stand it up as a lean innovation, blah, blah, blah kind of project, which meant that they didn't necessarily go through the appropriate channels for security and review and governance and things like that. So when we started looking at even the way it was described to me, what didn't give me red flags until I had one meeting when we talked about moving this somewhere else. And someone told me, did you know that this used to be an access database built by a student, blah, blah. And I was like, oh, crap. So we did some digging and found a lot of problems. Some very late night security meetings. When you're having a security meeting at 5 o'clock on a Friday, it's not good. Just putting that out there. So we had to turn it off. And it directly impacted operations. And they were furious. They were livid, and I was getting statements, and they were it was not a good scene. And I told them, I said, look, we're going to do this, we're going to turn it back on, I've got plans, blah blah. I got hauled into a meeting with a couple hours to prepare with the EX5s, so two senior ADMs, asking for updates, and I had already had my plan. I didn't have anything to present to them. Just pulled the meeting. I'm like, yeah, here's what we're doing, here's step one, here's this, and this. Blah, blah. It's the first time I'd really had a one-on-one with my new EX5 and this guy. The meeting went well. Apparently they liked how I just came in and spoke plainly and took control of it. I'm like, good, because I winged that. And then I just kept pushing my team. And by pushing, I mean just being like, this needs to get done, needs to get done, needs to get done. And so we got to the point where we're now going to be able to turn it back on probably next week. But I wasn't supposed to tell the other teams that we were doing that, because we had to be really, really careful now with all the process and stuff. So I just forwarded an email that, I have a question on this. But if they read to the bottom of the email, they would see the date we're probably going to get it turned back on for. Because it's just it's showing that yes, I understand the constraints, but I'm on your side. We provided the support, we gave them the information. So I've gotten to the point where the trust we rebuilt with this team, it took a lot of work, because we were rock bottom. Neither side really trusted each other. I didn't know what they were doing. They didn't trust me. I'm coming in out of nowhere, and they think that we're just going to be able to turn this back on. And the fact that we were able to mobilize the resources, move it quickly, that I did some influence brokering, full on charm offensive, played the politics, was shocking. And now they're like, okay, you said you could do it, and we didn't believe you. And to the point where I'm going to Pearson on Thursday now to meet one of them, and he's going to give me the full overview, full tour, introduce me to all his colleagues at the airport so that I understand it, because it's okay, you know what, we know that she's got our backs and she understands. But it was hard work. It was being honest. It was being open. It was trying to navigate within the lines that are created for us, but also so not, breaking things, but just, if you forward an email and there's stuff in there, being willing to take that chance, I think, is what really helped as well. And also the fact that I demonstrated through actions, not words, because talk is cheap. It's about delivery, right? Like if I just said, oh, don't worry, it'll work out, but they didn't see that forward movement, I never would have been able to rebuild any of that trust at all.
C'est toujours délicat ce qui touche à la confiance, parce que la confiance, ça prend du temps à être construite, mais ça prend pas grand-chose pour être détruite. Mais oui, de prendre le temps de communiquer puis faire les choses petit pas à petit pas pour reconstruire cette confiance. Merci beaucoup, Megan. I think that we will have time for another question. So the question is, what behavior have you seen from senior leaders to embrace failure, and how did they continue to encourage innovation and taking smart risks? Donc, quel comportement avez-vous vu de la part des comment je peux dire, de la haute gestion pour justement accepter ces échecs-là, et comment ils ont continué à encourager, à innover et à prendre des risques intelligents? Est-ce que quelqu'un voulait répondre?
So the question is like the example from senior management?
And how did they continue to encourage innovation and taking smart risks?
Yeah, so in one of the branches I worked at, our DG was a policy shop, but the DG actually, when they first came into the branch, they just asked the staff, would a failure hour interest you? Like if I shared, examples like learning moments or my own failure and what I learned from my own career, like would that help you? And then the branch staff were like, oh yes, please. And so at one of the branch stand-up, the DG started. So they did the first story, and I can't tell the story as well as they did, but the gist of it was that when they were a young public servant, they just raised their hand to just volunteer for any file. So anytime there was like a surge capacity needed, they would just volunteer. And there was like one really, really high profile issue, and they volunteered, and they did their work, did the analysis, put the recommendations. And they thought that was a pretty good proposal. But when that went up to the DG and ADM at the time, the ADM completely scrapped it, and for another reason. And they didn't say anything because they just assumed, well, I'm young, they're more experienced, so they must know what they're doing. So like, okay, I'll just accept that. But 6 months later, that project completely flopped. It was in the Globe and Mail. So, it's the public servant's nightmare, right? It's the worst case, the risk that everyone worries about. It actually happened. And so they have to go back to the drawing board. And the next solution that the new team came up with was the proposal that my DG had originally. So her lesson learned was that don't stay quiet. It's your obligation as a public servant to speak truth to power, not out of your own ego, but for the benefit of the public good, right? And it feels scary in those everyday moments. It's in those everyday interactions, and it's sometimes a split-second decision whether we speak in that spot or not. Or even if we don't speak in that meeting, we can always write an email, or we can always follow up with our manager. What do you think about this proposal? Is it worth raising it, at least, for their consideration? So there are many, many ways that you can have an impact, regardless of, your position. So I thought that was a pretty real reminder.
Ayez pas peur de parler, là. Oui, ça peut faire mal à l'ego, peut-être des fois, mais c'est vraiment dans l'intérêt des autres qu'il ne faut pas avoir peur de parler. Puis on a tous un impact, peu importe où on se situe dans la hiérarchie. Merci beaucoup, Yumi. Je vous remercie tout le monde et les panélistes de vous être joints aujourd'hui à la séance d'accepter cette ambiguïté-là. Assurez-vous, les gens qui sont venus à la rencontre d'aujourd'hui, de vous inscrire aux prochains événements. Josh a déjà mis le lien dans le chat. So thank you for joining us today. Be sure to sign up for upcoming events. Josh already put the link in the chat. Thank you very much, everyone, and have a wonderful afternoon.